Wow, you guys went off in the comments on my last video. Absolutely loved it. Some of them were positive, some of them not so much. But I'm going to reply to most of all of the types of comments that I received. So let's get into it. I had no idea that the video yesterday was going to be as engaging as it was. And you guys all had a lot of great content, some probing, some judging. And so I wanted to go through most of the comments and answer some of the questions and address some of the comments that were made. So the first one I wanted to address was somebody who commented, must be nice to have $50,000 that you can just invest in a GPU farm. And that's probably fair from a standpoint of somebody who doesn't know the journey that I've been on. And maybe I need to review how I grew it to this point. I didn't have $50,000 to invest. I had a little bit of hardware, a little bit of connections and getting some cheaper hardware, and I financed the GPUs. 24 months, 12 months. I was really fortunate at the very beginning of this. Best Buy had 24-month 0% financing when I started. I was confident that I would be able to break even well within that 24 months. So that was at least the first 5, maybe 6 of my 4090s were under that 24-month free financing. Most of the other ones were, of the other 4090s, were done using 12-month financing. Everything that I made from this went back into growing the GPU rental farm. So that's a big part of this, is all the revenue that you're using goes into paying off the GPUs and growing the farm. So I only have a certain amount of a credit limit at Best Buy and all these places. So along the way, when I had enough money to pay off the next one that was going to come due, even though it wasn't due, I paid it off to free up that credit limit for extending out the next GPU that I was buying another 12 months. Now I'm past that at this point. I actually have a good amount of money coming in each month to almost buy a 5090 with 1 month's worth of revenue. I'm not buying a 5090 every month. So that's a really good position to be in, but it took a while to get there. So key is, if you can find really good deals and really good financing, you can make it work. Now, there were some people that thought it was nuts, thought it was way too risky, but here was my thought. The reason why I was comfortable with this was because I was buying consumer GPUs, which have historically held their value quite well. Let's say that I didn't make enough to break even, but I made enough to like 25%. Well, that would have easily covered any possible depreciation I was going to have with my 4090s. So that's the way I viewed it. Now, I didn't start out with 4090s. I started out with 3060s, and then I moved up to 3090s. I got some great deals on 3090s. Right now, 3090s are going from $800 to $1,000. I was able to get 3090s at the time for between $500 and $600. So again, they generate enough income to help grow the farm and keep it going and get it to the point where it becomes self-fulfilling with taking all the revenue and feeding it right back into the business. People asked about a number of things regarding electric rate, solar, all those types of things. So yes, that is all very important things to consider. And I have done everything I possibly can to lower my cost of electricity. So first off, I do have solar panels on my roof, but that only accounts for about 10 to 15% of my total power used per day. But that's not really making much of a difference. The thing that is making a difference is hourly pricing And this is relatively unique. Illinois, both with ComEd and Ameren, have an hourly pricing program. I did a video on hourly pricing, which I will post here or here. But the bottom line is I save, right now I'm saving anywhere between 30 and 50% on my supply rate versus standard rate. Now, on top of that, I've applied for community solar, which for all the power that it provides, I will save an additional 20% on my supply rate. That's kind of complicated, and I will be doing a dedicated video on that once I get my first credit to my ComEd account, because that has not happened yet, and that may not happen for a couple of months. It takes time for this program to go into effect. I put a lot of focus on reducing the cost of my power, because that's straight deducted from your bottom line. The higher the cost of your electricity, the lower your profit's going to be. The next one I thought was kind of interesting. I'll just summarize it. The person just basically said salad sucks. They said that they put a 4090 on salad and they didn't get rented. Now, I can't explain because I don't know how the person deployed and what problems they may have had, but I looked at basically Salad has a demand notifier that basically says what the demand is for the different GPUs. And right now, at this very moment, 4090s are high in demand. There are times where Salad's customers come on and off the network. I had great demand for my 3060s, then it fell off a cliff, and now it's back. Your demand is going to vary from time to time. Sometimes you're going to have just absolutely great revenue. I had one 7-day period where my revenue was over $900. Is that normal? No, it's not normal. Right now, I'm averaging somewhere between 750 and 800. Patience is all I can say. Patience. The demand comes on and off, but in general, 4090s are in great demand. Another question that was asked was, what is the minimum VRAM? So the minimum VRAM, technically there isn't one, but I can't imagine 1660 Ti's at 6 gig are doing very well. The minimum would be 8 gig, but I certainly wouldn't put those on VAST. They don't make barely anything on VAST. But on Salad and Clore, they do okay. You're certainly not going to get rich on them, but if you already have them, it's a great way to get your feet wet with doing GPU rental. Start out with what you have before you dive in whole hog. That's what I did, and I have no regrets on doing that. It made a lot of sense. It's what I did with GPU mining too. I started out with a couple of 1660 Ti's, 2 in my PC, 2 in my daughter's PC, and then figured that out over about a year. Don't necessarily have to wait a year, but that's kind of how I am. And then started growing rapidly after that once I had kind of figured out a lot of the technicalities of it. So this is no difference. I learned Linux. I learned a lot of different things when it comes to Linux and troubleshooting any possible problems that you may have. Bottom line, minimum VRAM, 8 gig does work. If you are going out and purchasing GPUs, I certainly wouldn't suggest purchasing 12 gig at this point. I would go all the way to 16 gig. You can get a 5060 Ti for under $500, 16 gig. So that right now I think is kind of a sweet spot GPU. There isn't demand on some of the platforms for the Blackwell GPUs yet. 4060 Ti would be another one that does pretty well. Haven't looked at it recently on a lot of the platforms, but in the past it has done well. So the minimum I'd be looking at is 16 gig if you're going out and purchasing GPUs. Ideally, 24 gig or higher. Somebody asked about processor core recommendations for an 8 GPU rig. And specifically, they were deploying on an H12 SSL, a super micro board. And they were asking if a 24 core processor would be enough. And it is. I am running mine on a 24 core, but if I had to do over again, I would have gone with a 32 core. I think a minimum 4 cores per GPU is a good recommendation for 4090s. From what I've been seeing, it might even be higher for 5090s. I've noticed that the two 8 cores I have on the 5090s are rented. My 6 core is barely rented. So I may have to make a change there. So when it comes to 4000 series, I think 4 cores will work just fine. One bonus tip on the H12 SSL. Do yourself a favor. Have a power supply that only powers your motherboard. Just power the motherboard with its own power supply, because it is very, very fickle when it comes to power. So I was having all kinds of problems with it. And as soon as I did that and went to a very high quality power supply, now it just runs. Next question is, why not data center GPUs? It's a very good question. First of all, data center GPUs are big bucks. Secondly, can't buy them on 0% financing because they're not sold at consumer retailers. But lastly, they don't resell as well. At least that's what I'm thinking. I have a much larger market for 4090s and 5090s than I would have for like an L40. I mean, what, somebody going to game with an L40? I don't think so. I think they'd probably rather have a 4090 or a 5090. Now, does an L40 make more? Yes. But does it make that much more? It's not worth the risk to me, is really what it comes down to. I have very much debated whether or not to buy an RTX Pro 6000. They're about, last time I checked, I think they were about 8,000. 96 gigabyte of VRAM with basically a 5090 inside. They make a good penny, but I think about the resale value after the fact. So I'm still toying with maybe getting one of those, but haven't decided yet. It is a lot of money to put down on one GPU, and I worry about resale after the fact. The next one was, what is my favorite GPU? My favorite GPU is one that makes money. With that said, the best bang for the buck right now is 4090. Now, they're not being manufactured anymore. So that's an issue, because now you got to buy used, and buying used is a bit of a risk, because there are definitely scammers out there who are going to send you cards without a core. And I've been very lucky to not have that happen to me, but it is a possibility there are those scammers out there. Also, 4090s, if the person put it in a gaming PC and didn't support it, there could be a crack in the PCIe connector, basically. That's not good. It can be fixed. Northwest Repair repairs those all the time. But the problem is you just don't know. So from a new GPU perspective, my clear favorites are a 5090 and a 5060 Ti. I have bought both of them. I have 4 5060 Ti's and 3 5090s. But remember that Blackwell hasn't been fully adopted by everybody as far as their jobs. So the demand is still lighter than on 4090s, but it is picking up quite a bit. My stuff is rented a lot more than it used to be, even just a couple months ago. This is probably the most thought-provoking question. If I could tell my beginning self one thing, what would it be? And I would say, trust your gut. I was very confident in what I was doing, but I had a lot of naysayers saying, man, I don't know. I don't know if this is going to hold out. I don't know. There was a lot of naysayers that thought I was nuts to do what I was doing with the financing. I know there were a few people that followed in my footsteps, but I was confident. But I can't say it even really slowed me down much, because it wasn't like 4090s were easy to get. But I would say trust your gut. There was a lot of hearing all that noise and making myself wonder and worry, instead of just really focusing on just deploy, get it going, let it prove itself out. So that's what I would tell people, is that if you do believe in this, trust your gut. And yes, things could happen, but that's why I like this, is because I could sell the hardware. As long as I can sell the hardware, I'm in good shape. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I would say, concentrating on more of the infrastructure, the airflow and the power. So I ran my 8 GPU rig and my 6 GPU rig, all 4090s. I ran them off of one 30 amp circuit for way too long. Now, I did make sure I didn't exceed the 80% rule, at least not for very long. As soon as I discovered it, I would scale back the power on the GPUs, but that's not ideal. The person renting your machine is expecting a certain performance. So having to scale back because, oh, well, I didn't know that they were going to use that much power is not great. I wish I had updated to 200 amp a long time before I did. Airflow, I pretty much was on top of, but maybe focusing a little bit more on it initially might have been a good thing. Just make sure that you really need to focus on your supporting environment, the power and heat dissipation. I'm sure somebody's probably thinking, well, wouldn't you just have been better off in buying a shed? There's certainly those that would argue that. For me, I am thinking about going out to a shed, but when it comes to mining, being in a shed is fine because you have a constant amount of heat all the time. But if we're in the dead of winter and all of a sudden my stuff's not rented, I got a problem. So if I do a shed, I'm still going to need to put like a mini split out there just to make sure I can heat it if I need to. Not to cool it. I'm not going to use it to cool it, but if I need to heat that space. So there's some risks to putting this type of hardware into a shed that wouldn't typically have a heat source. But I am considering that. All part of the possibility of expansion plans. And then lastly, this is the bonus that no one asked. What is the biggest challenge to running your own GPU center? And really, miners know this as well, is being away from your rigs with no one there to help you if anything goes wrong. Now, I'm lucky in the fact that I do have Sunflower Mama, who is home most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time. So if anything goes wrong, I can tell her, hey, can you go power this off and power it back on? Things like that. I do have the ability, but most people are at work and you're just kind of stuck. And when it's mining, no big deal. You lose a couple hours of mining. In this case, you lose a couple of hours of AI and your reputation score, your reliability score goes down. And now you're not rentable. You may lose your verification. So it is so important that you stay up near 100% of the time. Some platforms are more forgiving than others, but it is very important to keep your rigs running. So certainly, if you're in an area that has frequent power outages, going to have to find a way to solve that problem. If you have bad internet service, you're going to need to find a backup. So you've got two internet services. Those are a couple of the challenges that are out there that you would need to make sure that you addressed if you decide to undertake this type of business. And of course, if you are looking for any help, I do have one-on-ones. They are going to be listed in the pinned comment and in the description below. Would be happy to help answer any of your questions in a one-on-one. Go ahead and apply to the limited sessions. Salad is a great place to start. Go ahead and look at the affiliate link in the description and in the pinned comment. And if you can use that, helps out the channel. Alrighty, guys, that's all I've got for this one. Please leave your comments. I will continue to answer any questions you guys have. Please like and subscribe to the channel. And as always, no tabs were harmed in the making of this video. Have a good night, everybody.